Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we're bringing you a review of a game that we've had for about 2 months. This is actually a prototype that you're going to see in front of you, but the game was released at Essen. It's called InBetween. It's a 2-player game that is a hand management, tug-of-war style game that's set kind of in the same universe as Stranger Things. It doesn't have the Stranger Things IP, but it's very similar.
Yeah, it's definitely not a licensed game, but it's certainly inspired by Stranger Things, which of course is hot in everyone's mind right now.
Yeah, and our first impressions of the game were awful, and that's because we played the game wrong.
Yeah,
which teaches you guys read the rules correctly, which is so obvious because the player cards just tell you how to play.
Yeah,
and
we just overlooked it. You know what? You'll have to forgive us. We read rules upon rules upon rules, so we got it right finally. And spoiler alert, our impression of the game changed completely because we absolutely love the game now that we're playing it correctly.
Yeah, so there are a number of characters in this town. There's always going to be 10 in the 2-player game. It's just a 2-player game. And you're going to splay them around in a circle. You're going to start with one character on the good side and one on the creature side. Now, the characters are 2-sided. And what you're going to be trying to do is flip them to whichever character you're representing, either the town or the creature, and then try to get them to the bottom location. There are markers that will be used to mark your progress down these tracks. If you are the creature, you want to devour the characters. If you are the town, you want to secure them in the homes.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. Is like this town is in between these two states, this sort of like awful dark universe and sort of the normal reality.
Now, I want to make it apparent as we start talking about the gameplay that when a card doesn't have a marker on it and it's either one of the 2 sides, that just represents the dimension that they're in. So if this side is up, they're in the town dimension. If they're in this side, they're in the creature dimension. However, they aren't physically in those realms unless they have markers in them.
Yeah, mechanically speaking, when they're in that state, they are in between.
Yep.
It requires one of these safety markers on either side to really mechanically make it clear that they're in one dimension or the other.
There's energy for each of the 2 sides. You have blue energy for the town folk, and then you have red energy for the creature. You have a number of additional markers that you can place upon these character cards to give them optional benefits from the cards that you're using. Going back to the cards again, on the bottom of them, there are different types of symbols that are represented in the cards that the players are playing. And also across the bottom, you have an effect. These effects will come into play depending upon who controls those particular cards at a very particular portion within the gameplay.
Yeah, and let's talk about the cards for a second, starting with the townsfolk cards, because what's cool, this is an asymmetric game mostly based on the kinds of cards that you have in your hand.
Yeah.
I have a variety of cards. They're going to basically benefit me in very similar ways that Jeremy's benefits his, although the creatures are a little bit more aggressive. The one big distinctive feature is that I have equipment in my deck, which Jeremy doesn't have. When you play this, like Jeremy said, you'll see this card has, all the cards have one of these icons. When you play them, you're going to be able to manipulate the safety marker on any of the characters that have this symbol.
Yep.
And then you're able to optionally spend energy to put this into play and have an effect. Now with equipment, when you put that into effect, it actually stays out and has an ongoing benefit or penalty for Jeremy, or the creature in this case.
Yeah, and as the townsfolk player, he can have 3 of those pieces of equipment in front of him at any given time. If he were to play a 4th, he simply has to discard one of his choice.
Sure.
Now, the creature deck is a little bit different. There's no equipment in here. However, I have a number of cards. Each of the cards is represented by 3 of a particular type. Again, they have a symbol representing which of the characters I can interact with and an amount of energy. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be cycling through these cards and interacting with these characters, trying to secure them into your dimension or your realm. You also have an awareness track. This awareness track is numbered 0 through 6. It's one of the 4 in-game conditions. We'll talk about how that comes into play as we talk about the actual game itself. So at the start, each player is going to take 5 energy. This is their starting pool that they'll be able to use on their turn, and they're also going to shuffle up their decks and draw 3 cards to put into their hand. To set up the game, you're going to have you're going to start with one of the 10 characters on the good side or the townsfolk side, and then each card after it's going to be representing one of the 2 dimensions off and on. And then you're going to look at the first available star, and then the opposite player will start. So in this case, Timmy, who is a townsfolk player, will be where the activity marker, this is the turn marker, so to speak, and then the creature player will start because that's the red one. Again, this is a prototype. We've had this for a couple months. It's not the final version, which came out of Essen. You also have a direction marker that's going to denote which way, clockwise or counterclockwise, that can be manipulated and moved by player interaction.
Basically, at the end of each player's turn, the activity marker is going to move, in this case, clockwise to the next character and flip to show whose turn it is.
So on a player's turn, they go through 4 steps. And in those 4 steps, one of them is taking one of 3 possible actions. However, the very first step that you take is you get an awareness phase. This allows you to use that awareness card that I showed you previously. You have an awareness tracker that's going to move down through this. One of the in-game conditions is to get it all the way to 6. However, this is a double-sided marker, meaning that at the very start of your turn, depending on how low this marker is, you can use that ability or any one above it. But it's a one-time use in the game. Once you've used an awareness, it'll still tick down, but you can't use that ability anymore.
Yeah, these are pretty powerful, not game-breaking, but pretty powerful rule-breaking abilities that you can use in a pinch to maybe grab 2 cards or grab some energy or do some things, aggressive things to the other player.
And this is what we got wrong in the game. So the next thing is the action phase. There's one of 3 possible things you can do. We were doing all 3 of them, which totally broke the game.
Yes.
However, the 3 things that you can do is either you can play a card. I'll explain that in a moment. You can prepare. We'll talk about the last 2 because they're the easiest to understand. Preparing is simply discarding any number of cards in your hand and drawing back up to 5 cards. Any cards you use in your game are going to go to the discard pile, which you'll be able to reshuffle once you've gone through your deck. The third one is to rest, and that's simply to gain energy back into your energy pool. You're going to be using this energy when you use cards. The number of energy that you gain is dependent upon how many characters are in your dimension. So if I were to gain energy right now, I'd count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the creature dimension, and I would gain 5 energy.
Right. And as Jeremy said, the energy is key when you're playing the cards. Now, you can always play a card, which is the other thing you can do as your action. When you play a card, like I suggested earlier, the main thing you're going to do is look at the symbol that you're playing. And then you're going to choose a character that also has that symbol on it to basically manipulate the awareness track on that. Or, for instance, I could use this on one of the cards that's in the creature dimension to flip it.
Yep.
The other thing you could use that symbol for is to take one of those tokens we mentioned earlier and add it to a card that doesn't have that symbol.
Let's talk about those individually. So, as David said, he has the number 69 here, as you can see. So he could take the 69 token and add it to any single card that he wants, giving anytime he uses 69 in the future, he can also use that or the one he just placed.
Exactly.
Or he could manipulate a marker. For instance, this is on his dimension side, and he could place a marker on the top spot. Now, the whole idea, again, is to get it all the way down to the bottom. So it's going to take several turns to do that. The other option is, you look on this card, Richard here has a 69, but it's in my dimension. So he can simply flip it over, since there's no marker on it, and turn it over his dimension. That means when he gains energy, he's going to get more energy.
Yeah, the flipping of the card is basically that middle space in the safety track, basically. So you're going to flip it over and then march down the other side.
Yep.
So then finally with the card, if you have the energy that you need, you can activate this sort of action here at the bottom of the card. And these do a variety of different things. Like Jeremy said earlier, he has a few different cards with 3 of each. The Townsfolk deck has a much wider variety of cards, some of which are repeated, some of which are not. But they have pretty significant abilities. For instance, this one allows me to skip a certain phase in this turn that might help Jeremy, given the situation. I have another card that allows me to immediately take another turn. This is going to require some amount of energy, usually ranging from, for the townsfolk, 1 to 4.
Yeah, and for the creature, I have some in here that require no energy at all, which is great.
Yes, unfortunately he did.
Yeah. So again, phase 1 is awareness. That's when you are allowed to use something on your awareness track. Phase 2 is playing a card for one of 2 different abilities, gaining energy or resting. So step 3, or phase 3 of your turn, is to do the activity phase. There's a couple things that happen here. Number 1, you're going to look at where that activity marker is. If there are no safety markers on that card, it's considered in between, and nothing happens for the rest of that phase. Now, if this marker were, say, for instance, on this card, and there is a safety marker on it, something is going to happen. The first thing is, regardless of whose turn it is, whatever creature or dimension it is in, that player is allowed to spend energy to move their awareness marker down. So, if my awareness marker is on 0, to move to the next step, it costs me 1 energy. To move to the next step, it costs 2, and you're only allowed to do one of those steps each turn. The second thing happens is the most important portion of the game, really.
Yeah.
This is when you're going to look at the progress of that safety marker. On these cards, there's 4 steps, but there's 3 different types. The very first one on each one is either, if it's on the town side, it's alert. If it is on the creature side, it's nervous. But the bottom 3 are both different states of the game that allow you to do something during this phase.
Yeah, basically on the townsfolk side, it can be guarded or secured. And on the creature side, it's terrified or devoured. And when it's in that state, then on the character card, you're able to take this action as well, which in our second playthrough, these became incredibly powerful and very important to the gameplay. So basically spreading out your activities while you play the game to get control of multiple cards is going to trigger more and more of these actions. However, if you do that, you're not going to be making as much progress to secure or lock these characters down.
So again, as long as this safety marker is on one of the bottom 3 areas and that activity marker is in that area, that player gets to enact whatever ability is on the bottom of that card, which is huge. And then the last thing you can do on your turn, or the last thing that happens, is simply this is going to move to the next card and then flip over. So the in-game conditions, how does the game end? One of the ways to end the game is if any one player has reached the bottom of their awareness track. The second way is to, at any point, one player has either secured 3 different characters or devoured 3 different characters. That's by getting the safety marker to the bottom of those particular ones. The final way is there's only 5 character cards left. Some of these character cards will be taken out of the game permanently by specific effects in the cards or specific effects from the characters. Once there's only 5 left, you're just simply going to count how many are in which dimensions. Right. Whoever has more in their dimension wins the game.
Yeah, and I generally like games that have these multiple victory conditions where you can sort of go different routes, and this is no exception. So, I think we can get straight into the review.
Yeah.
We've already kind of spoiled it. We both really like the game. What would you say? It's kind of hard because we played it wrong once, but what would you say is one of the things you really sort of like about now that we're playing it correctly?
Well, the cool thing about it is there's a multiple different number of characters. You always play with 10, but there's a whole stack of them off to the side. Each of these characters are double-sided, and the sides aren't the same on both sides, so the creature benefit is completely different than the player benefit. So what you can do at the start of the game is you can go through these and flip them to see what you're trying to flip, or you can just play it naturally out. Either way, they all provide really cool benefits once you lock them into those secured or devoured states. And I love that portion of the game.
Yeah, and it's really cool, too, because those powers, once they come out, like this one that Jeremy was just holding, on the creature side, this one basically lets him take my awareness level down 1 level if possible. And that's, if he's down in one of these bottom 3 spaces, that's going to happen every time the activity marker's on this card. So it guides my play, because if I have abilities that maybe take a character out of the game or affect awareness level, I'm going to focus on this guy, because if I'm trying to win this route on the awareness track, basically this guy in the game made me focus all my attention on locking down or securing characters.
There's a lot of smart decisions that you have to make, whether you're going to be playing a card, gathering energy on a particular turn, using those cards to flip a bunch of them so that your energy, when you acquire energy, you're acquiring more from having those, or do you want to really power in on one character to try to get them to that bottom state so that you can get one of the end-game conditions? There's a lot of choices in this.
Yeah, and one of the things I liked about this most, and again, this is by comparison to how we played it first, but this game plays really quickly. The turns are one of those 3 things, and oftentimes I'm saying, I'll take my 4 energy next
turn.
And you just keep it moving. So that tug of war that exists innately in a game like this is really emphasized by that speed of play, because it's just, boom, like a tennis match, just back and forth with different things. And there can be some big moves. I can load up on energy and then play a bunch of cards at once using some of my abilities. So it's really exciting that way.
I also like how they are completely asymmetrical too. This deck feels completely different than the deck that you're playing. Plus, once you start to play the creature deck over and over, you understand that there are particular cards you're trying to dig for at particular times, especially like the card like Entrapment, which allows me to move and manipulate things a little bit quicker. You have cards in there that allow you to take additional turns when you spend the energy, but you have to have the energy in order to spend them. So you start to understand the cards and the nuances of the game. And it's very quick to play, as you said. I wish I had the Stranger Things license, but even that, the artwork in this game is fantastic.
Yeah, the
it's
artwork,
really good.
The artwork's great. And last note on Stranger Things, even though we just binged it, our enjoyment of this game really has little to do with that.
Absolutely.
The fact that it doesn't carry that license, the game itself is really good. That theme really works really well with this, and I think it's really cool that they went out and did it.
Yeah, great 2-player game, plays in about 20 to 40 minutes. InBetween by Board and Dice.
Yep,
I haven't heard of them before, brand new company. If you guys are interested in the game, make sure you guys go out and grab it. I think it's going to be available soonish, right?
Yeah, it came out at Essen, and I think they're still working out distribution here in the U.S., but yeah, it should be coming out.
If you have questions, please ask them in the comments below. I know the rules are online. Please subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do here at Man vs. Meeple, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 2 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored in part by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.